SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Catherine West from Visalia, California. And for many years, my husband has listened to the podcasts. And so every time I am stressed about anything, he has said, well, we need to call Save with Conrad. We ended up in a situation where we thought this would be helpful for us. So we were struggling with some credit card debt that we had. We knew that we had some equity in our house that we could possibly access to get some cash out and refinance, consolidate some of those things. And so we were able to do that with this latest refinance that we did. It saves us so much on interest and really helps us out financially. Plus, we have a little left over to be able to do a few things around the house that we wanted to. And the money that we were paying into those things, we can hopefully start saving now. In that alone, we'll save $1,400 a month. And it didn't change our house payment, maybe even like $50 less. I feel like we're far away in terms of like the United States, but I don't feel that far away from you guys. I always feel like you're a phone call away, you're an email away, and always like available to me. Diane Raver is who we worked with. And every time I needed her, I was able to reach out and contact her, and she was always getting right back to me. I felt heard. I called with real concerns, and I really just needed some help and to figure out how to make this work. I never felt like I was getting this because you just wanted business. Like I felt like you genuinely care about what I need, and you heard what I needed, and then you found a way to make that happen. And so I recommend you guys wholeheartedly. I feel like you'll be honest and helpful. And feeling heard is just what every person wants to have done when it's in a situation like this. My name is Catherine West, and I saved over $1,400 a month with SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com.
Well, he certainly is the biggest, most impressive guest I've ever had on the Ross Report. And he's a guy that I always had my eye on because I knew that he had this wonderful football background, and he played in the Big 8. And the Big 8 had my Oklahoma Sooners in it and his Colorado Buffaloes. And I want to welcome my friend, Leon White, better known to many of you as Big Van Vader. Leon, how are you doing, big boy?
Hey, man, I'm doing pretty well, sir. It's cooling off. The leaves are changing in Colorado, and we're moving into winter, and it's a beautiful time of year here in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, it is.
I enjoy it very much.
The Colorado's been in the news a lot lately with all those marijuana dispensaries. You haven't bought a chain of those, have you?
No. You know what? I know this. There's a friend of mine that actually owns one, and he's got $1.5 million worth of lighting alone, so he's doing very well. And
yeah.
There's a few individuals that have capitalized on
somebody.
Law, so. Somebody
said Oklahoma should do that because of the tax revenue that it creates, mm-hmm. and the new money. You know, everybody. You know what? When we were all those years when a lot of us, including yourself, we were working, you know, without a quote unquote a contract. We were always looking to make that new money. New money was a good thing for our business, you know. So,
sure,
it was a good thing. Hey, I wanted to ask you. This was, and it's just interesting to me where guys come from, because you don't know where you're going until you can trace where a guy's been. You grew up in Compton, California. Now, without me sounding bad, which I don't want to, I'm not, but Compton, California is not known for large Caucasian red-headed men. So you must have stood out like a giant beacon.
We're talking about years ago now. When I was growing up in Compton, my father was a welder in the Navy. He could weld underwater, and he was a very valuable man in World War II, and was working down at Todd Shipyards, which was just literally minutes away from Compton, and you jump on I believe it was the Long Beach 7 highway, and he was at work in 10 minutes, and my mother's family all lived there, and they had been there from the 40s and the 50s, and so that's where we ended up, and obviously the demographics of the city were changing. We lived very close to a Compton College, and it certainly had its challenges. I mean, it was a situation where how do I put this? You either stood your ground and fought, or you became very fast in terms of running. And I was pretty good at both. So it's certainly there's a whole bunch of material on Compton, California alone. But I don't know if you want to hear all that.
Well,
stuff
let me ask you this question: in high school, was your high school football team integrated?
You bet. My high school football coach, he obviously knew that the law, the forced busing, forced segregation was coming, so he had an assistant coach, big part of the fearsome force from Los Angeles Rams, and his name was Harold Daniels. He was a defensive tackle. He obviously wasn't one of the starting four on that team, but he was 6'8" and 360 pounds, and he went on to have a very good coaching career. And they went down there and they handpicked a whole bunch of athletes, and we didn't lose very many football games, very many basketball games, very many baseball games, and because of their selective type recruiting, they knew the kids were going to come, so they were down there handpicking athletes, and they certainly took advantage of that new law that was coming in. So
yeah,
we were part of that.
Leon, how did the Southern California people, or did you want to get out of Southern California? I'm thinking, you got Southern Cal had a great tradition, and UCLA, and they're kind of in your backyard, both those schools. How did you escape Southern California's college football program and end up at Colorado?
I was recruited to a number of schools, but USC and UCLA were certainly amongst the schools that were interested in giving me a football scholarship. And for me, I needed to get out. As I got older and bigger and stronger, I was 315 pounds in high school, 320, something in that range, and very strong young man. And my group of friends that I hung out with, we were city kids. We were a rough bunch of kids, and we didn't run very often, I guess is the way I could put it. And I knew that for me, I needed to change. I needed to change the scenery and change the lifestyle. And I knew probably I would leave a lot of my friends that I had developed, lifelong friends from 6 and 7 and 8 years old.
Sure.
Needed to get out of that environment, and I thought, for sure, going 20 minutes down the road to USC was a lot of that type of thing that I'm trying to discuss here is would have came with me.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Boulder, Colorado was a small little college town, and it fit into my idea of getting away from it all.
Well,
but Colorado played some good football back then.
Yeah.
We were top 10 ranked team in the country. And
you go to Colorado, you change the scenery. It's certainly not Southern California, being in those beautiful Rocky Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Had a good career, All-American career, All Big 8 career as a center, offensive lineman, big offensive lineman.
I actually started out as a guard and started at both guards, and then moved out. The freshman and sophomore year, and even my junior year, and then moved out to tackle. And we flip-flopped the power right guard and the power right tackle. So we flipped that. So I went out my first senior year and was a preseason All-American at tackle. And then I tore a medial meniscus, which is your inside cartilage. And then I was awarded a red shirt and came back to the pivot position at center. And did very well for only having played 1 year at center. I was all conference and all American, and I think that really was my home. Probably should have been where I should have been all along.
Yeah. Well, they found the right spot for you, and you get drafted by. This is what I find ironic. It's based on what we just talked about. You get drafted by the L.A. Rams. You're right back in Los Angeles.
Yeah, you know what? It was front page of the L.A. Times. It was a big deal for me. It was all those girls in high school, the homecoming queen, and the just didn't quite get around to dating. All of a sudden they became very available when you're on the front page of the L.A. Times and coming back to L.A. as a high round draft pick. So that was a lot of fun.
How many years all told were you in the National Football League?
You know what? I signed a 5-year contract. I got paid 4 of them, and obviously had a career that was short and injury-ridden. I ruptured 6 weeks before the draft, Jim, and I was heralded as, you know, the number one ranked center in the country, and was 325 pounds at center, which was a huge center for the day. The centers, you know, back in that era were, you know, the 275 to 290 mark, I think. So, you know, getting drafted to the Rams 6 weeks before the draft, Jim, I ruptured a patellar tendon. Wow. And I'm still drafted in the third round, which is, you know,
pretty amazing.
Not supposed to be drafted.
No.
When you hurt something that serious and 6 weeks before the draft, but they took a chance on me, and basically, you know, I came back and played a little bit for him, got some time in preseason games and stuff like that, but it really never came around. And when the knee I'm talking about and the tendon, it ruptured again. And I remember Don Klosterman, who was the general manager for the Rams, and said, "Leon, hey, you know, we sure gave it heck, and we respect your effort and everything that you've done trying to get that leg right." And, you know, because they had time and money invested in me, and certainly I wanted to give it my best shot. But it was time to move on, and it was after the preseason of the fourth year, and we parted ways. So,
well, it's at least you had a run there. You had that dream that a lot of guys, a lot of us average Joes could only fantasize about. So.
Real quick, Jim, the Rams, we actually played in the Super Bowl. We were NFC champions and played in the Pasadena Rose Bowl Super Bowl against Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was their fourth Super Bowl that they had won. So, you know, that was an experience. It was just to be part of that team.
Sure, man. That's history.
Yeah, it was something else.
Yeah, and those memories, the years you played may not have been as long as you wanted, but the memories that you made, you'll always have. So that's a pretty cool deal. When did you meet after the NFL, Leon? How did your transition? How did it go from whatever you were doing after the NFL to getting into pro wrestling? Did you grow up a wrestling fan? Was this something that you backed into? How'd that whole dichotomy come about after football?
I was into real estate. I had gotten as a Ram. First thing I did was after I was drafted, you know, obviously was excited moving back home, really going, you know, I'd only been away for 5 years because of my redshirt year in college. I'd only been in Colorado for 5 years, so it was a homecoming for me. And obviously I had a different zip code of my high school days and my younger days in Compton, and I had bought a fourplex about 3 blocks from the beach in Belmont Shores. And I did that with my bonus money, and got a real estate license and was developing properties. And, you know, in the off season, I was very interested in real estate and did well in it.
If you're selling real estate, you played in, you go to the NFL. The injuries do what they do to a lot of guys. It ends careers before they need to end. Now you got your real estate license, which is smart because you got Plan B. But how did you get with Brad Reagan's? Because Brad Reagan's is the one that trained you, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I believe Brock Lesnar was trained by him also.
He was, yeah.
Yeah. Brad, I went down with a gentleman by the name of Greg Boyd, who was a former Denver Bronco. And Greg was a big man, 6'7". And Greg and I, we took off, headed to Minnesota, and we followed each other. You know, him in my car, and we went down there and rented a place and hooked up with Brad Riggins, and he had a big, nice home. And Brad is a wrestling fanatic and very, very good coach. And he trained people, a lot of big names. I mean, you know, Brock Lesnar, myself, and Kurt Hennig, just to name a few. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So Brad is a recognized coach as far as I'm concerned. But he had an indoor pool down in his, I don't know what you'd call it, his garden level, and he just took some cement and filled it up and set up a wrestling ring and some weights. And Brad was a great amateur wrestler himself, and he trained people there. That's where I was trained.
Was the goal that you'd train with Brad and then go to work for Vern Gagne?
Well, you know what? It really didn't have much of a plan starting out, but, you know, obviously as we started training, and I had gotten for some reason I had it set in my mind that you had to be 400 plus pounds to be a professional wrestler. So I'm in the gym lifting for size and strength, and I got up to that probably a legitimate 415 pounds, and just was huge. I wore a 72 coat, and I could bench press 600 pounds, and I could squat nearly 1,000. And I would, Jim, this is a true story. I could take 365 pounds behind my neck and jump press it, doing basically a military press behind the neck press, sets of 10. And I'm not talking about repping at one time. I'm talking about a set of 10, resting and doing another set of 10. I was extremely strong and a big mobile man, agile in the ring and moving well and drop kicking and doing things that. So we kind of, with myself and Greg Boyd, who obviously he's an NFL defensive tackle, so he was a very athletic and 6'7". So we got some interest. I remember Vern and Greg and coming over and watching us work out and stuff like that. So that kind of came about as we drew attention to ourselves, basically, from what we were doing, in Brad's camp.
Sure. You get out of Brad's camp with some fundamental skills, big natural athlete, amazing strength. Where was your first booking as a pro wrestler?
I probably Denver, Colorado, and one of the things that
was it for Vern?
Yeah, you bet. One of the things that I guess upset some people is that everyone was required, if you were going to get booked by Vern back in that time, you had to live in Minnesota, and I never did really have to do that. I stayed in Boulder, and they flew me around and got a little heat from the boys on that one. That everyone else was down there suffering those long, hard winters in Minnesota, and the winters here in Boulder aren't good anymore, but they were certainly better than Minnesota at that time. So, but Denver, Colorado, and I debuted as a big baby face, former Colorado All-American.
Was that your baby bull years?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, Leon, the baby bull white, or bull power.
Yeah, bull power.
And
some of those old, some fans will remember seeing some of those older ESPN AWA shows where you were being, featured as a young guy, new guy, so big, agile, But I remember the baby bull and the bull power and all that stuff where they'd book against some of these poor underneath guys and you just guzzle them. It's like they didn't have a damn chance, but it was really entertaining. I guess at some point, Leon, and I'm only guessing this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
That the money working for Vern in those days, somewhere along the way, somebody came to you with an offer to go to either Japan or somewhere, because you broke away from the AWA after that baby bull Leon White run. He didn't put you on top, as I recall. Am I right or wrong on that deal? You're still kind of learning your way, but you knew that there was.
Yeah, I'm learning my way. I'm going over. I was probably not experienced enough to carry a single match, and I was part of tag teams with myself, Scott Hall, and Kurt Hennig. We would represent a three-man, and of course Kurt Hennig and Scott Hall were the tag team champions, so I'd fit in that way, and either as part of a more experienced guy, where I could come in and highlight myself and take a little shine and get back out, where I wasn't really required to carry the match or anything of that nature. But a Big Otto Vance, he came over, and he had a company, CWA, in Austria, Ketz Wrestling Austria, and had a good crew of gentlemen. I mean, older, more experienced wrestlers, and they wrestled rounds over there, and I found that very, very interesting, where we would wrestle 4-minute rounds, and I had turned heel at this point, and so I guess Otto. My understanding is Otto actually paid Vern some money, and next thing I know, I'm being told by Vern that hey, would you like to go to Austria and work full time, work every night, and they have seasons where you would work 7 or 8 months out of the year, and you'd go over there and live and come back, 3.5 months out of the year and then go back there. And it sounded attractive to me, and I jumped all over that. And I went over there and worked for a big Otto Vance and the catch wrestling. And once I got over there and got used to the style, I became their world champion, I think 3 or 4 times, and became their intercontinental champion, and had a good run. Made for the time what was very good money, and drank some good cold beer, and had my young family over there, my wife and my son, and it was a great experience.
How did you get hooked up in Japan? Who discovered you, or who gave you your first opportunity to go to Japan and work?
Well, you have to go back to the AWA days where Masa Saito had spent some time in jail. Him and Ken Patera had gotten into some trouble, and I don't really know the story.
At the McDonald's.
I'm sure.
They were drinking.
Yeah, okay.
They were drinking too much, and they had a disturbance of some significance at a McDonald's that saw both of them incarcerated for a length of time.
Yeah, I mean they were actually in jail for months. I mean it was a big deal, headline deal. And his first night out, he got out of jail that morning and wrestled that night. And I don't know how accurate that story is, but it was like he got out of jail and he was just a moose. And I'm talking about Masa Saito.
Yeah,
he had been eating well.
Yeah, he was a stud boy.
In prison, yes, he was. He was like punching a cement wall, and very well built and very, very strong. I think it was Greg Gagne, Scott Hall, and myself in a 6-man against Masa Saito and Larry Sabisco. And it was a big Japanese kid, 6'6", and he worked under a kind of an assassin's type uniform. And I can't remember his name, but big kid, especially for a Japanese. And I was being me back then, and obviously had some strength that we had talked about earlier. And I remember taking Masa, who was probably really close to 300 pounds, and I snatched him up and pressed him over my head and did some things in the ring that he liked. And after the match, I remember him coming up and talking to me on the casino floor, and we had a beverage together, and he was talking about Inoki and his abilities over there and where he was planning on going. And obviously he got out of prison and was going back to Japan and going to work here and primarily over there. He was moving himself and I believe his wife back to Japan, and asked me if I was interested, and I said yes. So that's really where it started. And then I took off to Europe, and apparently he couldn't find me for months. He came back and was looking for me in Denver and Boulder and AWA, and finally said, well, he's over in Europe working for Big Otto Vance, and they sent, Inoki sent this gentleman by the name of Masao Hattori over there. And Masao spent a week and watched me wrestle. And
I mean, Tiger?
At the end of that week, Tiger Hattori, yeah.
The referee, yeah. And a good and a hell of an amateur, too. And became their liaison. And Tiger now still lives in New York City, where his family has been for many, many years, and represents New Japan. So you were in good hands with Tiger. He was a good man.
Yes, sir. And he came over, and like I said, he made it very clear why he was there. He was there to watch me, and at the end of the week, he said he'd be in contact and pretty much made me an offer. And it started out as an offer to work basically when I wasn't working for Otto, and I don't think there was any intent of ever really honoring that situation, but that's how it started out. And so I got off of work and went home, and then flew to Japan and did that Christmas tour. There was a 5-week Christmas tour. And that's how it started. So.
And boy, what a run he had there, folks. We're going to talk to Leon White, also known as Big Van Vader. We have followed Leon's career from Compton to the Colorado Buffaloes, back to L.A. for the Rams Super Bowl game. Being trained by Brad Rangens as a pro, and now we got Leon has gone through with Otto Vance in Austria. Now back over in Japan, thanks to Masa Saito getting in there. Leon, your first company you worked for was with Inoki, New Japan, and Inoki had been on a multi-year, 7, 8, 9 year winning streak. He was
undefeated. Yeah.
Yeah. It was perceived that Inoki could not lose. He was Superman.
Exactly.
He was like their Hulk Hogan of the early '80s in WWE. He was the man, but he wanted to get.
And Jim, if I could add to that, and really much more than that, he was. I mean, Hulk Hogan, he certainly deserves all the credit that he, has got. He started it all here, in my opinion. But Inoki had this godlike status. I mean, people used to bow to him, and he'd walk by, and they would actually get on their hands and knees and bow to this guy. He was, this was the guy. I mean, he, wrestling was perceived as non-entertainment. In other words, it was a real fight, and here's a guy that had gone undefeated for nearly a decade, and he really had status and he went on later to be a Japanese senator, a member of the Japanese Diet, and his accomplishments and his notoriety and his popularity and stardom, et cetera, et cetera. He
married a movie star. He had everything. He had the magic life. He had the magic life. And if anybody could ever say somebody was quote unquote over, Antonio Inoki in that era was over. But he wanted he wanted to make you a star, and it shows you what booking can do, and being unselfish and creative can do, because he had you literally beat the hell out of him and beat him in under 5 minutes, and people could not believe it.
Could not believe it, and Jim, that was at a sold-out Sumo Palace. It was pretty much my debut as Vader. They had showed me the mask, and they had showed me the costume, and had introduced it, but I actually went into the ring that night as Leon White, Bull Power, and then with the horns on the side of the head, the Road Warrior type hairdo, and we had spoke before. Really, it was very, very serious in terms of before match not speaking. So we had got to speak probably weeks earlier, and basically he said, Leon, this is extremely important for the company. And we're talking about making you the number one person in the company. He said, even above myself. And so, he was trying to get across my mind the importance of this match, and how I handled myself from that point on in the ring was extremely important. And Jim, you know what? I went out there, and like you said, in under 5 minutes. And I don't really believe he's a mixed martial arts guy. He's a shoot wrestler, shoot fighter, and had envisioned himself as not a tough guy, but an extremely skilled fighter in the ring, and someone that could really hurt you if he got to hold you in the right position. He could break your ankle, your wrist. He could choke you out. And Inoki in his prime was a very, very dangerous man, and he said, Leon, you won't hurt me. You go ahead and you hit me as hard as you can, and I'll take care of myself. But we have to let the people know that this is one challenge that that maybe I've met my match. And obviously, with that long run or streak of being undefeated, was going to come to an end. And he, obviously being chosen for something like that was a great honor. But man, I laid him in there, and we had a very short and brutal match. And I had hurt him, but I had caught him a few times, and in doing exactly what I was told to do, and ended up with just a simple power bomb. I think I pressed him over my head and then brought him down into a power slam position, and just got some air and then covered him up. And these people, they went absolutely crazy. They started lighting. Obviously in the Sumo Palace, they don't sit on chairs; they sit on pillows, and they cross their legs, and that's the style and the custom over there. And they were lighting these things on fire and throwing them at me, and I didn't really know what was going on at first, or the seriousness of it. And then Tiger Hattori was the referee, and Masa Saito came out to the ring and said, Leon, we got to get you out of here. So I went back to the locker room thinking, well, hey, I'll get my gear. And they said, no, we got to go, because these people were just pissed off.
Yeah, if they're burning pillows that they're sitting on, you literally and figuratively had heat, because they're throwing burning pillows at Leon Vader. Who came up with the idea for that big elaborate mask, that headgear thing that you wore?
Again, that's Antonio Inoki. He Big Van Vader, Vader is supposedly a 5th century samurai warrior, And as the lore has it, or the legend has it, was his village champion, and how they settled disputes in that time was simply they would, the two champions of each village would row out to an island, they would fight, and whoever came back, and I'm talking about a fight to the death, and apparently Vader and this other champion fought for 72 hours, they died at each other's feet, and again, I don't know how much fact is in that versus legend, but there was a real individual who was a samurai warrior named Vader, and I guess it was, quite an honor for me to be given this name, and it was, the T-shirts, the original T-shirts I was being made and being sold and marketed over there in Japan was, this Vader, and it said the Emperor's Warrior on it, and that's who Vader was, and again, in the 5th century. So,
well, in that famous match you had where your eye popped out with Stan Hansen, was that with Baba or was that with Inoki?
Well, I was the world champion for Inoki, and probably not too long, maybe a year, 2 years after that debut, and Stan, of course, was the world champion for Baba, and we were at the Tokyo Dome, and I really don't remember. There was several Tokyo Domes I was in, but we were one of the main events, and Inoki fought a Russian judo guy. He was one of the main events, and Stan and I were one of the main events, and they introduced some big sumo wrestler that had lost some weight, and I forget his name exactly, but him and Bam Bam were also one of the main events. So,
Bam Bam Bigelow you're talking about, of course.
Yeah, you bet. Bam Bam fought this guy, put him over. He was big 6'8" sumo guy, and he was a grand champion. And this before sumo wrestling had been exposed as a work, and so it was a huge deal for this guy to actually, train himself down and become a professional wrestler. So it was a big night.
What happened in this match? How in the hell did your eyeball pop out?
Well, you know what? Stan, the first thing I want to say, Stan's a friend of mine. And, he was a friend of mine before and a friend of mine after the match. But, there were just probably a few things that probably shouldn't have been done that night. I had been told to take the mask in the ring. And Stan was being introduced first for whatever reason. I don't know. They flipped a coin, and I'd have no idea. But he came out to the ring first and introduced, had his belt, and I came out with my belt and that mask. And I said, I'm not going to get in the ring with that mask because Stan's not going to let that happen. And they said, no, you'll be fine, do it. And anyways, that's what Inoki wants. And so that's pretty much where the conversation ended. When Inoki said something, you did it, period. And so I've got my belt in one hand and this mask in my other fist, and Stan, I'm coming up the stairs, and he comes across the top of that rope, and by his own admission, he can't see past his hands, especially in this situation because the ring was really brightly lit. Outside of that light, it was really dark. So, and he'll admit with his, I've heard him say he can't see his hand in front of him in those situations without his glasses on. So he comes over the top rope, probably not seeing me with this cowbell and that rope he had, that cowboy rope and bell, that still hit me right in the face, and busted my nose. It cracked my orbit. And this is before I got in the ring. And I said, damn. And I took a step back down, and there was, it wasn't blood, but it was this liquid just pouring out of my nose. And it hit me so hard, something that just broke loose, and it was just pouring out of my nose. So it took me about a couple of minutes to gather myself, and I shook the cobwebs off and set the mask down because I knew I wasn't getting into the ring with that mask to begin with. And again, I don't really know if Stan had any idea he had hit me. And so I got in the ring and just walked up to him and slapped him side of the head with that cowboy hat. And you have to understand, this is Stan Hansen in Japan. Not just, he's an American, but he had icon status very similar to what Inoki had. And you just didn't do that to Stan Hansen. And quite frankly, I just got hit in the face by a piece of steel before I got in the ring, so I didn't really give a shit who he was.
Yeah.
I went over there and slapped him, and about knocked him over, and the bell rings now, and we're going at it, and I'm still madder than hell. And I got him in the corner, and I tuned him up. And in fairness, Stan was he was a few years older than me, and I think he was still in his prime, but he was on the backside of his prime. Headed down that slope at that point, and he was 265, and I'm 415. So, when I slapped him, and he came at me like, what's wrong with you? And what's wrong with me is you just hit me as a piece of steel. And I backed him in the corner, and I tuned him up a few times with some rights and left, and they were pretty solid. And next thing I know, I can't see. He took his thumb and just thumbed me in the eye. And I've got the tape to prove it, and that's just a fact.
I saw the match, and I know that I told, in all due respect to both of you guys, I thought the match was just breathtaking, because I saw two guys that beat the hell out of each other, and I said, man, if we could do that in WCW just occasionally, and have that kind of physicality, not tearing somebody's eye out, but just working snug, that it would be, it could revolutionize and jumpstart WCW at that time. That was one of the catalysts. That match was one of the catalysts of booking both you and Stan into WCW at that point in time, because it was such an impressive match. Do you remember the finish of that match in Japan on that eyeball match?
Well, we were scheduled to do a 30-minute Broadway, and that's really what it turned out to be. Because and again, my memory of it was that he hit me with the bell before I got in the ring with the cowbell. And then we had the altercation in the corner just minutes after the bell had rung, after I smacked him in the head, and with that cowboy hat. And then he, probably 3 minutes in the match, my 3-4 minutes into the match, my eye literally had popped out on his cheek, and I shoved it back in. And then it was so painful. I had the Lucha Libre style mask on at that time. This was before. In other words, I didn't like wearing that mask. And again, Inoki said, wear it, you wear it, period. This is your gear. And I didn't like it. So I came up with the leather mask myself. It gave me some freedom, and perhaps I'm a little claustrophobic. So I came up with this, and he said, that's not just a good idea, it's a great idea. So he let me do it. And so it was before that. So I just pulled that Mexican-style mask off because it was hurting. It was pressing up against the eye. And without the mask on, it's, obviously even Stan could see that I was messed up, because I had felt it. And if I kept that mask on, he, who knows, he would have probably hit it again. And so I wanted him to see it. Yeah. And it worked out well, because it had a great visual effect. And then, we went ahead and finished the match. So I probably worked at least 20 minutes with that eye, but, obviously with the mask on, I felt it on my cheek, and I just shoved it back in the socket, and the swelling swelled over it and held it in place. And like I said, I took the mask off. And
one of the more historic matches in the annals of Japan.
The start of a new year is the perfect time to get organized, set goals, and prioritize what matters most. For me, a top priority is my financial wellness, which feels more important than ever. Thanks to Rocket Money, my goals feel achievable. They show me all of my subscriptions right in one place and help me easily cancel ones that I forgot I've been paying for. Rocket Money also pulls together all of my spending across all of my different accounts, so I can clearly track my spending habits and see where I can cut back. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. See all of your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money is going. For ones you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all accounts. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/JR today. That's rocketmoney.com/JR. rocketmoney.com/JR.
Leon, I want you to kind of play a little word association here. Just a quick thought or two on some guys. We heard you mention Misawa. Why was Misawa? These are I got a bunch of these guys, so quick answers here. Misawa. Why was Misawa so popular in Japan? Why was his work so over?
You know, Jim, just talent. Just if you want a quick answer, he is probably, Misawa smoked, and like a lot of Japanese athletes do, and the whole country smokes, by the way. But just tremendous talent. Just probably one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with. And even at the end, toward the end, when he was, he was having his sevens and sevens after the matches and had gained a little weight and was smoking, pretty much a chain smoker. Could still go half hour and just tear the house down.
Yeah.
And I never really got to work with him, when he was a young kid. But I understand he wasn't just talented; he was phenomenal. Just unbelievable.
You talked about Inoki being a godlike figure. What about Mr. Baba? How was your relationship? I've always heard he was an honorable man and was one of the promoters that most wrestlers trusted. Is that true?
Yeah. You know what? He just flat out did what he said. Period. Didn't have a whole lot to say. I remember.
Did he trade you to Inoki in '87? Were you actually traded your contract to Inoki? Was that?
Well, I was booked. Nick Bockwinkel had saw some potential and said, "Leon, you would be fantastic with your size and strength, and you would just get over in Japan." And he set something up. In other words, I was just leaving Bern, going to Europe, and set me up with Baba for that Christmas tour that I eventually did with Inoki. And my understanding is that Saito was looking for me and finally realized that I was actually booked for Baba. And yeah, I understand there was some sort of negotiation where Inoki did something, paid some money, gave him another wrestler. I don't really know the specifics of it, but yeah, there was some sort of deal. And Baba didn't. Baba was loaded with big name Americans, so this kid, and he had no idea who I was or where I was coming from. And then again, Saito had worked with me just getting out of prison, and Tiger Hattori and Masa Saito were extremely close. So yeah. I think between those two guys, they made it happen and told Noki, hey, this is someone we really need to get or look at. So.
Speaking of promoters, what's your thoughts on Vince McMahon? You're just, working. You were in WWE for a run at the end. I've always said, people said, well, who's the best super heavyweight you ever booked? And I always say, well, there's only a few that would even be in the discussion, but any discussion that anybody has that has any brains has to include Vader as the best super heavyweight, or he and Bam Bam Bigelow certainly would be in the conversation. There's others. I get the fact that there are others, but you're always in the conversation for me in that regard. But how do you explain to those that ask how your tenure was working for Vince?
Vince always treated me like a gentleman. Mr. White this, and he always shook my hand and welcomed me. And so, how he runs his business, and what decisions he makes, and quite frankly, he is the man that makes them. But I was treated very, very well and very fair by Vince. I was paid well, and I don't have anything negative to say about the individual. Obviously he's not just successful, but in the extreme, he's taken that company and made it the international.
Well,
it's a monster.
What about?
So as far as
go ahead.
As far as I was treated, and I never really got to be Vader, and I think we had brief conversations because Jim, you were entirely responsible for bringing me from Japan to the WCW, and I don't know if people know that, but like you said, you had brought Stan over, and
I liked you, Leon. You're my kind of guy. And that booking committee, when you have a booking committee that's made up of people that are active performers, a lot of them don't want competition. And I wasn't going to be seen in tights, at least not in public. And I wanted to. We need to freshen things up. We need to turn things around a little bit. And I always felt like, and as I said earlier, you and Stan, whether you were working with each other or with other people, were going to bring a different presentation and more physicality, not carelessness, but physicality, locking up, being men. And I thought that would have been great for WCW to build a reputation on. So I always thought that you would have had a great run as the WWE champion if you had been booked that way. It just didn't, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out that way. But it would have been, the WWE Leon was a babyface territory where the babyface generally was the champion. The Hogan era, the Austin era, the whole deal. Bruno, Backlund, they just weren't a territory that. Now Bill Watts, and Bill Watts loved heel champions because he wanted the badass guy that the babyfaces could chase, and he loved that deal. So you had to run with Vince. I thought some of your matches with Shawn Michaels were absolutely phenomenal. I really did. I thought, because I got to call a lot of them, so I'm being
sure.
I'm not being objective, but personally as a fan, I thought some of your matches with Shawn, who was kind of the guy at that point in time, were just.
Shawn had a lot on his shoulders. He was the guy. I mean, he was the world champion, and he was carrying the company. I mean, this is before The Rock, before Stone Cold, before a lot of things. I mean, it basically with Shawn and Undertaker and Bret, and I guess for whatever reasons, it was Shawn's turn to carry the load, and he had a lot of pressure on him, and it showed.
It was tough. He did have a lot on his, and he lived a different lifestyle than he lives now. He's a born again Christian. He's got a wonderful wife and a family. He's not the Shawn Michaels that he was, that you worked with in that era. And quite frankly, Leon, you're not the same guy today that you were then. You changed
absolutely
for the better. So that's all. Everybody can change.
There's a lot of things that I could say, and you know what? Bottom line is with what you just said. Shawn is a different person than he was, just as I am, as we all are. And he's got a beautiful wife and kids, and he's a successful retired wrestler. He's a born again Christian, and he just simply is probably in-ring performer. And obviously I'm not including Mike work in this assessment, but he's got to be considered in-ring performer, just one of the best. I mean, ever. I mean, I don't really know how I would assess his work on the mic, but I mean, if you couldn't have a good match with a Shawn Michaels in his prime, you didn't deserve to be in the ring, because that wasn't a real hard thing to do. And we didn't just have good matches; we had great matches.
Well, let's segue to another guy that was pretty good in his day, Ric Flair. You had some outstanding matches with Flair, and some fans on Twitter asked me to ask you if you remembered the 1993 Starrcade match with Flair. Was that the one that was in Charlotte? I was gone at that
I think
point.
it was, and we did close to 30 minutes, and Flair is deserving of all the accolades he gets, and he was a good worker. It wasn't really for me my style. I enjoyed my matches with Shawn. I really enjoyed those matches, and my matches with Sting. And Sting and I were trading off the belt, and pretty much during that run that I had with Sting, him and I were pushing the company and carrying the company. It was either Sting on top of somebody or me on top of somebody, or it was us on top of somebody. And it was Vader and someone. Vader and Cactus Jack, Vader and Ron Simmons, Vader and the same went for Sting. And I really enjoyed the matches I had with Sting.
The Sting, I remember one match you guys had where the finish was, I think you went to the top. And as you came off the top, which people got to understand, a 400-pound guy, agile and have balance and agility, getting to the top rope, you came off the top to like a cross body, and he power slammed you, if I remember. And I thought, simple, yet believable, common sense finish. It's almost as if your size played to your disadvantage because he was able to turn you in midair and power slam you. So your size worked against you in that moment, which made the finish logical. And I remember.
I'm sorry, Jim. The thing about Sting is you have to give him credit. You know, Sting is big enough, is as agile and as quick as he is. I mean, he's got agility and athleticism like a Shawn Michaels, quickness like a Shawn Michaels, and yet he's not a small guy. Yeah, he's a big, strong guy. At least the Sting I remember back in the WCW was a big, thick, strong individual, and 6'1" or 2, maybe even a little taller, 6'3", but big, powerful, quick, talented athlete. And because of that size and his ability to not only dish out punishment and pick me up, and again, a legitimate 425, 420, and it varied in those days, but his ability to handle my size in terms of not only absorbing blows, tackles, and clotheslines and things like that, but being able to actually pick me up and like you just said, the top rope power slam.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think the business today is often overthought, and that finish was simple, straightforward, and it was logical. It wasn't hard to sell to the consumer, to the viewer, as an announcer or as a talent. You went into no man's land, took a risk at 400 pounds on the top rope, and he was fortunate enough to be able to counter that and beat you with that hold. And I looked at it this way: it didn't hurt Vader, and it was just it was a once in a lifetime moment, because I've never seen anybody else do that to you, or at least on a pay-per-view or TV. I thought that it was a hell of a finish, quite frankly.
Yeah. Throughout my career, I mean, I've had some of the best matches I've ever had have been in Japan, and I think what I was able to do at literally, I'm always billed at 440 or 450, but I was a legitimate 415 pounds, and someone that could legitimately, in my prime, bench press 600 and do that behind the neck military press, and that was impressive because I used to. Even very strong people couldn't do that. Scott Norton was a legitimate 700-pound bench presser, and his arm wrestling abilities were, he's one of the best arm wrestlers in the history of arm wrestling. So his strength was incredible. He couldn't do that, and I would take 365 pounds and jump press it behind my neck for a set of 10 and rest and do it another set. Scott Hall tells a story where we're in a gym in Minnesota. In the AWA days, and he's doing squats, and he said he had built up to 315 pounds, and I said, Scott, you mind if I do a set? And I was warming up, stretching, and I went over and I did 315 behind my neck 15 times and did it easy. The 15th rep was as easy as the first one, and he said the whole gym stopped, and this was one of those gyms where everyone's 300 pounds. And
well, let me ask you this question, and I don't mean to.
Yeah.
Those are phenomenal numbers, and I know, and I've seen you at different stages of your career. I always said to people, the WWE would have been blessed to got a 30-year-old Vader that hadn't had injuries and wear and tear and people don't even understand the fact that traveling at 400 pounds to back and forth from Japan, hey, that ain't easy either. I mean. Getting into the damn lavatory on the airplane ain't the easiest thing in the world, to be quite frank about it.
That's funny,
right?
Because every time I get in that damn thing,
yeah. So what are you going to do? You can't do much. So, but
the thing, Jim, here's the bottom. The things that I was able to do, and I don't think, you mentioned that one of the best big men are super heavyweights, and quite frankly, as a super heavyweight, I think I'm the best super heavyweight in the history of professional wrestling. And you're talking about Bam Bam was a super heavyweight. Yokozuna was a super heavyweight. There was nobody of my size at 400, legitimate 400-plus pounds with that type of numbers in terms of strength that could go to Japan and do the things I did with 220-pound men.
Oh, yeah, 30, 40-minute
25
matches.
and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just didn't do it. Just didn't do it in my youth with Inoki. I mean, for me to wrestle 25 minutes with a Ricky Choshu or a Antonio Inoki or any of those big stars back then in the New Japan era.
How much were you enhanced? Did you? How much?
I'm sorry, sir?
How much did you? Were you using some roids, or were you just this big, massive? Because I know, obviously, in high school, because I did my research, you're a massive human being in high school. You were a massive, strong, freakishly strong guy in college before anabolic steroids were involved. Did you ever?
I'm not going to, have a conversation about anabolic steroids, but I think for me to honestly say I've never used them, I've never used anything in terms of like these designer drugs, the DECA or the bodybuilding drugs. I flat out testosterone. When you're coming back from a knee surgery, which I've had, more than my fair share of, where you're coming back from a shoulder surgery, or an elbow injury, or a knee injury, or a lower back injury, those types of things, you'd go to your doctor and
Sure.
say, I've got to be in the ring at this time, and he would give you something. But on a regular basis, I've never had to, and obviously,
genetics.
I think the fact that if you look at my body, it never, you'd say, well, this guy's a big, strong guy, but he's certainly not bodybuilding, taking.
Didn't you tell me?
Steroids.
Didn't you tell me one?
Had to.
Did you tell me one time that your great grandpa that lived in Oklahoma was a giant of a man as well?
Yeah, he was legitimate 6'6", 6'7", 380, and Dan White. He was a redheaded guy back in born in 1872. So you figure a man that size in that day and age was a monster.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, I want to ask you a question about two guys that were in Japan. I don't know how much your paths crossed, but two guys I know you respected, as did I, Dr. Death and Steve Williams and Terry Gordy. How was what's your memories of those two guys who have both left us much too young?
Well, Doc and I, we got very, very close and became good friends during his time with Inoki. And obviously he made the jump to Baba. He got a much better deal. He saw Inoki was headed one direction, and quite frankly with me. And Bam Bam had came over, and Doc had a meeting with Baba, and I think the direction was with Baba was more directed towards Steve, and obviously he made that move, and I know he made a lot of money with Baba and has just as good as anyone ever has a career in Japan. The thing about Doc was obviously extremely strong. He had the background in amateur wrestling. Could just do anything, and had the type of endurance and the athleticism. And this is what I was getting at. With me is, for my size, was being able to not only just work with these guys, but have competitive 20 and 25-minute matches.
Absolutely.
And that's what Doc could do.
Yeah.
And Doc. He wasn't as heavy as me and maybe not quite as tall, but certainly was a giant of a man. And for him to go over there and have that competitive, credible 30-minute match with these guys that are half his size, that's something that other big men couldn't do. I mean, Yokozuna and Bam Bam, Bam Bam was certainly as talented as anybody, physically gifted, but you weren't going to see Bam Bam past that 20-minute mark very often.
Yeah.
Where Doc, routinely did 20 and 30-minute matches, and again, that's something that I've always prided myself on. Was not only the physical athleticism to pull that off.
No super heavyweight ever wrestled with the quality that Vader has wrestled in, as far as time, 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it may be, ever. That goes without saying. Hey, I want to close this interview with one thing, because I feel like it's important, and I think for me it was significant. The night in Baltimore when you came in as a champion and you put over Ron Simmons, who became the first black world heavyweight champion. Did you realize Now, Bill Watts was the booker at that time, was the head honcho. Did you realize at that time the history that you guys were going to make with that match?
I don't think very many people did. I don't even think Ron grasped the significance of that moment. I know this, for me personally, I had a conversation, very brief, with Ron, saying, Ron, absolutely, 100%. I'm not just for this. I mean, in other words, Ron is a man, and he's a man's man, and certainly deserving of my respect. And, you know, he had a football background, and we had a great relationship. Somebody that I liked a lot in the extreme, but someone I admired. And I think that's so. I really didn't see it that night as me giving an African American a first opportunity. I saw it as, hey, this is good for the company, period, because it's Ron Simmons, the wrestler. And, you know, regardless of his color, he was going to go on and do great things with the world title. And to be honest with you, becoming the first African American heavyweight has gone on, and it seemed to, you know, gathered importance as time goes on. But so I had the conversation, and I had made my mind up to do it immediately, because it was I guess it was a last minute decision. And I had told Ron, you know, hey, absolutely, but I was upset at Mr. Watts, and I was upset at Bestie, because they're having this big meeting backstage, and, you know, didn't think to include me, or hey, bring Liam on, let's see what he's got to say. Mm-hmm. And so Bill and I, we kind of butted heads on a number of things, and you know, I know Bill has made a change in his life, and but he was pretty much one way at that time, and you know, I had a few flat out frank conversations with him. Hey, you know, I show up on time, I'm in shape, and I do not just a good job, I do a damn good job. And so, in other words, whatever your agenda is, whatever you got to say, you know, really, we don't need to have that kind of relationship, because I'm here, I'm on time, and I do what I'm told, period. And I remember it was kind of a showboating thing for me, because, you know, Ron and I had, you know, I had called that match move for move, and I wanted to make sure it was competitive, and it was it had its peaks and valleys, and yet at the end it was definitive. And, you know, the running power slam was me. In other words, and Ron, I remember, you know, he has a way of expressing things. I mean, his one-liner, damn, you know, it was kind of like that. And he said, wow. He said, Leon, you know, you do something, you do it right. And I have gotten nothing but respect for not only calling that match the way I called it, but the finish itself from Ron, and really from everybody at this point. But it was an honor for me to get in the ring with him. But I remember at the end there, Bill comes out, and like he's, you know, and I think I told him to basically go somewhere where the sun didn't shine and leave me alone. And it was a last minute showboat thing in front of we were in the ring, and the bell was about ready to ring, and he's out there lecturing to me about, you know, what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do. And it didn't come off real well with me.
Yeah, I got you. Did you guys ever make peace, you and Cowboy?
You know, that's what I'm trying to say. We never had a problem. You know, I was in a position because of the work I did in the ring and the world titles I held, and, you know, to look him in the eye and say, hey, man, I show up on time, and, you know, you leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone, and let's get the job done. You know, more of that type of relationship. I didn't need to be motivated or spoken to or.
All right. No, you're a ball player. You came from an athletic background. I remember one time I think I was going through a Bell's palsy situation. I was working at the gorilla position, producing the announcers, and Cornette was your manager, which had to be classic. Because I've always thought that Cornette, whether you like him or you don't like him, or his opinions, but as a performer, as a wrestling manager who could get heat on his talent and could cut great promos, he was pretty damn good. I mean, he was really, really good. And so I remember you were getting ready to go out and wrestle somebody. Could have been Shawn, going out first as a challenger. The wannabe football coach came out in me, And I don't know what I said to you, okay, Leon, it's showtime, let's go play the big game, whatever. Something simple, but it really resonated with you. Like, you have my respect, and everybody that was within earshot, they knew that you had my respect, and I was the one that was booking the towns, and I was doing the payoffs. And Cornette told me after the show, he said, boy, did you see Leon tonight? And I said, yeah. I said, he's pretty damn amazing, wasn't he? He said, yeah. He said, he got what you said. And he said, I don't get all that football talk that you guys talk about, you and Leon, but he got it. I said, yeah, he gets it. He's a ball player, man. He's a ball player that became a wrestler. And he took the same, he wants to win. He wants to be good. It's not a matter of just winning and losing. It's about, can I go out and perform with this, whoever it is, Shawn Michaels, Masawa, Stan Hansen, Sting, Ric Flair, all those guys you worked with. So I believe, Leon, in closing this thing, you're a Hall of Fame guy. I'd love to see you go in the WWE Hall of Fame. You're due. I think you deserve it. That's my opinion. I have great respect for you. I loved working with you in WWE and in WCW, and I miss seeing you. So you're one of my favorite guys to be around. And
that's really nice, sir.
Well,
let me respond before you close it out completely. I'm not going out of my way to put you over, but my matches that were announced by you in the WCW, with the net. In other words, the WWE has a net. You're able to go back in time and watch things. And when you were announcing my matches, the matches were different. They were better. They were more exciting. Myself and Sting, for example. And then it switched. It was Shivani and...
You mean Jesse Ventura? You're talking about Jesse Ventura?
Yeah, Jesse the Body. Jesse and the other announcer, they did a good job. But prior to that, it was the Jim Ross show, and you were there, and you were, early in my career, and then the early matches I was having with Sting, and there was a definitive excitement, and actually you would put an aura of danger. In other words, this is one of the biggest, strongest men in the world, most athletic, 400-pounders we've ever seen in this sport. But you put me over, and I've always thought that about you, and I wanted to say it tonight. I want to take this opportunity. I enjoyed wrestling when you were the announcer because the match simply was better.
Thanks,
and
Leon.
that's the bottom line. That's coming from what I honestly believe.
I appreciate that, Leon. Thank you.
And it's always been that way.
It's a mutual respect thing. And folks, if you I know promoters listen to our show. Leon's still out there doing his thing. You can reach him at It's Vader Time Forever at yahoo.com.
You bet.
That's It's Vader Time Forever. ITS Vader Time Forever, FOREVER at yahoo.com. And that's Leon's website. So if you're interested in Leon on a show or doing a clinic or talking to your kids or wrestling, autograph signings, whatever it may be, just reach out to It's Vader Time Forever at yahoo.com. And I just hope that, Leon, that good Lord willing, I'm around and above ground to see the day that you go into the WWE Hall of Fame, which I hope will not be in the too distant future. So you deserve it. And say hello to your wonderful family. And I love your son, Jesse. You know that. And
yes, sir.
I know he's doing well. So, Leon, thanks for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what AdFreeShows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. and you want to talk about early, you can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.